I was disappointed to get this material that we received tonight, because if we had had it earlier, we might have been able to avoid some of this misunderstanding that some of this material puts out. I'm going to go back to my box again, okay? A budget is an estimate of both revenue and expenditures going into that box that I talked about, which is the school district. And there are two uncertainties to begin with budget. Remember, estimate is another word for guess. Somebody's got to pontificate on how much revenue we're going to get. And somebody has to pontificate on how much we're going to spend and what we're going to spend it on. And those two numbers have uncertainties with them. And let me put it this way. If you take the math and look at a $125 million budget, and you take a 5% uncertainty, meaning your guess is 95% accurate, you're over $6 million, plus or minus, on one part of your budget or another. And it applies to both sides. That's a budget. It's on the revenue side too. The revenue has a number. So nobody in their right mind would set up a budget or a revenue estimate that they thought was dead nuts on. Because as soon as the legislature changes their tune in the June 29th, or as soon as the real estate market tanks, or as soon as a million and one other things occur, those estimates are bad. And the last thing you can have in a budget for an organization is an overly optimistic, that means right down to the bottom dollar estimate, and then find out that one of them's wrong. Your expenditures go up or your revenue goes down. There's no leeway in the school district budget for you to make a mistake that way. So what you've got to do is be very, very, very conservative. And so that tends to mean that you underestimate revenue deliberately to some extent, and you overestimate expenses and try to resolve those two so you get a closer budget. Well, what that amounts to is that if you're 95% right, you're off by $6 million when you finish up for the end of the year. And the problem, again, that people don't seem to understand is revenue stream is not funds inside the box. And expenditures are not funds inside the box. What's inside the box is the differences between the two and how it accumulates. So, whereas the fund balance, which at the end of the year consists of, first of all, the 5% that's socked away in the reserve account, and the difference between the estimates, which is added to that, is a set of numbers that's not continuing revenue. That's just the difference in your estimates of the revenue and the expenses. And what you see in some of the figures that even have been presented tonight are that number is creeping up just like the budget is. Well, you'd expect that. If it's a fixed percentage estimate off on either one of your expenses, it would be a number that's creeping up sort of like the budget, because the budget's gone from $100 million to $125 million over a certain period of time, and the difference in these estimates is going to creep up at the same amount. So it's kind of interesting to note that because we spent less last year, all of a sudden the so-called projected fund balance is less. Well, gee, maybe the estimate was done about the same accuracy as the one before. So there's not a continuous stream of revenue to offset taxes. That number in there is just like a savings account. The one we've designated 5% for emergencies, and the one we haven't designated, which is how sloppy is our estimate? How much can we be off and not have a problem? So there isn't a flow of money in there to cause the revenue stream to be higher than it should be. There's only a difference in estimates, a fixed amount of money inside a piggy bank, inside the box, and part of that is money we know is going to be there because we reserved it. And part of it is money we think is going to be there, but we can't be sure. So we can't allocate that to anything. So trying to claim that there's, quote, $6 million available for tax relief is bogus, because it isn't available for tax relief. Because taxes are that revenue stream, and it's got to be continuous. And if you can't recover the next year, you can't take that money and throw it in this year and then all of a sudden say, well, not only do we have to raise taxes to the maximum for the index plus the exceptions, but we've got to cut all of these programs because we don't have the other $3 million to get the number. That money is not there. Nobody's being overtaxed by some huge amount of money that could be just flowing out to people and make everybody happy. It's not there. The revenue stream hasn't been affected. These numbers are just, like I said, a physical reserve and a budgetary estimate number that's out there in that box. And that's why the number doesn't go zipping way up continuously, because it's the same money. It's about the same amount, depending on the size of the budget. It creeps up a little bit each year because of the size of the budget. But it's a fixed pile of money that's being shuffled from year to year for the most part, except for that little bit of increase. So it doesn't appear for the revenue stream. It can't be put on the expenditure side either, because, believe me, there are people who would like to spend $6 million on extra things, but they can't get at that money either, because it's not available in any rational budgeting scheme to use that money, because it is an artifact of the budgeting process. And it's always going to be there unless you start to have budget swings that go negative. And we're not allowed to have budget swings that go negative. It's against the law. People can be put in jail for violating the law. So I give high marks to our financial team for keeping the estimates on a steady course for so long in East Penn without getting us into trouble by suddenly giving us a revenue that dipped far more than they projected, or giving us expenditures that ballooned out beyond what they budgeted. They've got to keep controls on those, and the control is about $6 million, roughly speaking, 5%. So trying to use that money for, and claiming that it's there for tax relief, is leading on the taxpayers by saying something that isn't true. The money might be there if the budgetary estimate is correct, and it might not be. So if you say leave the $6 million and the revenue stream doesn't zoom up to the factor that they have done, and it only comes up and covers half of that $6 million which you tried to give away, you've got to dig the other $3 million out of your current budget and not spend it this year. And that's equivalent to telling them to do a cut of $3 million right now. So if you want to do that, that's fine. Tell them to make a $3 million cut right now, and then you can lower taxes. And if you're willing to specify what that $3 million cut is, more power to you. That would be the openness and transparency that everybody keeps claiming that they need. You openly tell us what you're willing to cut. But the $6 million is not there. It's not available. It can't come out of anything. There's no bank account that is suddenly stuck in. From year to year, that flow just sits along there with that kind of thing in it. And part of that is then invested. We get now very little on that slop between the two numbers, so we can't even get any good investment money out of it. So it's just not there. It's a misunderstanding of budgetary process. It could have been explained to anyone who asked why there isn't $6 million floating out there that you can give to somebody for tax relief. It wouldn't have to be coming out in the last minute in a situation where it's out for sound bites but not for sound explanation. So my problem is that proposing these kinds of things with either one-time money or with phantom money that isn't there, doesn't solve any of the problems. Look, it's real simple. You want less taxes, you must accept less services. This is a service organization. You tell the organization how many less services you want, and they can figure out how to deliver that less service. But we pay most of these people to advocate for education. It's not their business to make cuts which they see as harming education. If we want to do that, if we feel that that is the will of the community and that's what we're trying to represent and put forward, then it's up to us to tell the administration, here is what we want to cut. It's not fair to an educator to tell them to harm education by the cuts you want to make. So tell them what you want to cut, get 5 votes on the board to do it, and that's the end of it. You can have any tax number you want. But don't try to sneak it through as there's easy ways to do this. There's hidden money. There's simple cuts that can be made. I've heard all of these BS arguments, and they're not true. Man or woman up and put your cuts forward and say how much you're willing to cut and what you're willing to cut to achieve whatever goal you think is appropriate. That's it. Cut services, you can cut taxes. If you're not willing to cut services, I'm telling you that inflation will drive you up at 3% per year per average. It's 2.7, 2.9 right now. That's about average. It happens every year. It's going to happen every year. So proposals like this are window dressing. They're chicanery. They're snake oil sales. They're not there. Propose your cuts if you want taxes down. Propose your cuts. Otherwise, this is all bogus. That's my opinion. All right. Ready for round 2.